So our 11 o'clock panel is Through the Lens of Baseball. Speakers are Donna Muscarella, Tracy Greer, Margaret Lawrence, and Jessica Kleinschmidt, and moderator is Leslie Heaphy. So, where's yours,
Thanks,
guys?
Tara. Appreciate that. Welcome to great speakers that we've had already. And I see Tracy and I see Jessica and Donna and is Margaret. Margie, are you here?
Yeah, but I gotta get my damn camera to work.
Okay, as long as you're there, we've got you. So I'm excited to have this panel. As you saw, the theme of our conference overall is through the lens of baseball, and there's lots of different lenses through which we can approach. And so wanted to put this panel together of individuals who take different approaches to thinking about baseball. And so as I like to do with a good panel, you don't want to hear from me, you want to hear from them. So I've asked them all to take a few moments to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what it is that they do currently, however they want to approach that. And then we'll get into some, and I figured to do this, it's probably just as easy to go alphabetically. So we'll start with you, Tracy.
Oh, good morning. So my name is Tracy Greer. I am one of the assistant sports editors at the Chicago Tribune. This is a job that I've had for a few months now. Prior to that, I was a senior MLB editor at The Athletic. So in my previous job, I did nothing but baseball. In my current job, I do baseball in addition to all the other sports. So I am learning a lot about spelling hockey names right now. I have a little over 20 years as a journalist. I've also worked in different capacities. I've worked for sports nonprofit. I've worked for athletic media relations. So I have some of that in my background as well.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. Alphabetically, that would mean Jessica, you are next.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I'm kind of nervous. You guys are phenomenal people, and I'm so just blessed to be here. So I work for the Oakland A's. I'm one of their broadcasters, mainly on radio and digital at the moment. I'm also writing and reporting and host a show over at Awful Announcing and The Comeback. Writing has been the love of my life, so I'm glad I get to go back into that. Before this, I was with NBC Sports Bay Area for 3 years. I was kind of their A's pseudo sideline reporter, but I was also covering the Warriors and the Niners. So I got to cover those teams as they went to their championships, which was super cool. And I did a little hockey, and I still can't pronounce and write names. So I get you. It's really difficult. And then I was with Cut4 for MLB.com for about a year and a half before that. So this is my 5th or 6th season full-time with Major League Baseball, and it's been great. So I'm excited to be doing a little bit of everything and just really blessed.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. Next up, if I know my alphabet correctly, it would be you, Margaret.
Well, actually, it's Margie. I don't know why it says Margaret. Anyway, I'm an artist and I paint baseball. I grew up by Wrigley Field, so I'm a Cub fan, see? And I don't know, I can draw and paint. I was a theater major though, and an actress first. But I came back to Chicago when the lights came back on at Wrigley Field. I went to school next door to Wrigley Field. My grade school was next door to Wrigley Field, and I could hear the ball games from my school. It was pretty cool. Anyway, I paint and draw, and I fool around.
That has to be awesome to be able to actually have heard the sound of the ball all the time. I mean, that's
well,
really
I could hear the crowd cheer, and I could hear that organ music.
No, that's awesome. All
Very
right.
distracting while you're trying to learn.
All right. And next up is Donna.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I like to describe myself as a fourth generation baseball enthusiast. And one of the ways that I express my love of the game is through visual art, mostly photography, but also mixed media artwork that incorporates my photography and hand cut Allen and Ginter baseball cards, which also ties in my love of baseball cards. So
Have you been a baseball card collector all your life?
Pretty much. I went to my first ball game at 2.5 years old. I do remember portions of it. It was at the original Yankee Stadium pre-renovation. And once my dad was sure that I was fully entrenched in my love of the game, he introduced me to baseball cards. So I've been collecting for the vast majority of my life.
That's awesome. I have two. Did you used to put your baseball cards in the spokes of your wheels, or were you better than that?
Never. Neither did my dad, which is why it really breaks my heart that when my grandmother was making room for my parents and I to move in after my dad finished his naval duty, that the cards went in the garbage.
Gotcha.
Mint, never flipped, never smoked, nothing, and they're all gone.
I hate to admit that I did. So I did both of those things with my baseball cards. So I always wonder which ones I lost because I don't remember. But anyway, just a quick reminder to everybody as we talk a little bit to, if you have questions, to please put them in the chat and we will watch for those, and because you will get a chance to, and we would like to take your questions as well. But the starting question that I have for the whole group is, in thinking about our theme and what it is that you all do, and you all do very different approaches to and thinking about and have had an engagement with the game in a variety of ways. How does what you do help you express your thoughts, your love, your feel for baseball? That makes sense. You each take a different approach. How does that help you in thinking about what you think about baseball? And anybody can start on this one and we can go down the line. So doesn't matter to me, or I can
go.
Okay, thanks, Jessica.
Of course. So I actually played baseball when I was younger. I didn't even know softball existed. I thought it was just everybody played baseball. So I played until about my sophomore year of high school. And that's when my high school baseball coach said, sorry, softball exists, so you have to switch, which was a whole thing. And to this day, I still give him a lot of shit for it. I'm passive aggressive about it. I would never approach him, of course. But he, I had to switch an entire sport, make new friends. And so I kind of fell in love with baseball because I played as long as I possibly could. And so I kind of take that approach when I'm interviewing players. And, numbers are one thing. I feel like we could all look up numbers, and I feel like I want to kind of take it to the next level and say, if you see a pattern with the numbers, what's going on with you mentally, and, I'm a firm believer in dad power. A lot of times they come back from paternity leave, which I feel like needs to be longer. But they come back and they have a different mentality, and I want to know what their approach is. And I had to kind of ask the questions because just as a woman, I don't have the exact same MLB resume as the Dallas Braidens of the world. So it doesn't matter what kind of a panel I'm on, no matter what, they're going to have a better resume than me. So I try to pick their brains about it. And luckily they've been so welcoming because of that. And I know I only had a limited playing amount of time, but I have probably a longer playing time than a lot of the guys I share a press box with. And I feel like that definitely helps me. And I feel like the numbers are certainly there, but when I fell in love with the game, I knew the reason why was because I was so curious. So that helps in my job as a journalist. So I have a big overview from that. And I also do just kind of have like this anger because I was, told I couldn't play a certain sport past a certain age, not even knowing that another sport existed. And now, of course, they're embracing it. There's female leagues, which I think is beautiful and wonderful. And we're embracing everybody. So for me at the beginning, it's more about wanting to extend my career, knowing I couldn't do it physically. So wanting to do it from the curious journalistic approach. And knowing that I've been in the dugout before to a certain extent, I feel comfortable at a ball field. And that certainly helps. So I try to have a bigger, a wider overview, and it just helps me approach the players and the coaches and the staff more as time goes on, because I am curious, and it taught me that I deserve to be there. So that's certainly helped in everything, because at the end of the day, they know I didn't play with them, but if I ask the questions and they know I'm genuinely curious and I'm an extension of what they said, it makes the broadcasts better, it makes my relationships better, and ultimately it helps my knowledge.
I'll chime in. I relate to that, Jessica. I was also the girl in the Little League. And I didn't have problems with my teammates. I had problems with their fathers. It was the dads who were trying to get me out. But I did not come from a sports family. It's kind of a shock that I'm as into sports as I am. But my baseball origin story, I grew up in the middle of nowhere, New Mexico. And this was before the Rockies existed, before the Diamondbacks existed. So the closest team was 2 states away. But we had WGN on our cable systems. So I grew up watching the Cubs in the Sandberg, Grace, Dunston, Dawson era. And that's how I fell in love with not only the Cubs, but Chicago as well. And I am fortunate in that, so as a journalist, I have to maintain a level of objectivity, which we can have a whole debate on objectivity in journalism and the definitions of that. But I have to keep an arm's distance, because I have a responsibility to report the facts at hand, and to make sure that my reporters who I oversee and edit are doing the same. So you kind of have to keep an arm's distance. So the way that I am fortunate in that I get to bring my love of baseball to my day job, in terms of the subject matter that I am working on is something that I am very passionate about, and I have a responsibility to bring the game to readers and to the audience. And so it's great to be able to work in a subject that I am passionate about, even if I have to maintain kind of an arm's distance. I'm a Cubs fan. I have spent a lot of time this week looking for photos of sad Cubs, right? I need David Ross looking sad. I need Dansby Swanson looking awful. I had to look at so many photos of Seiya Suzuki dropping that fly ball, but that's the job, right? I can't not post those photos. So that makes it a little difficult. But again, it's being able to work in a subject that I love is really awesome. I've done news side coverage. I've done, cops and courts and art splash and all kinds of other things. So again, fortunate to work with a subject I love.
You get to keep coming back to baseball. Donna or Margie?
Well, I already said, how I began to love baseball is that I lived down the street and my school was right there. So it was Wrigley Field for me. And go ahead.
Margie, quick question related to that. So you paint, certainly with some of the Cubs in mind, but you paint a wide array of baseball subjects. So how do you choose what it is that you're going to focus on? And because you've done everything, you've got Joe DiMaggio, you've got Negro League pieces, you've got women's pieces, you've got the whole gamut of baseball amongst your paintings.
Well, I just like baseball. And then when I started reading about Jackie Robinson, you got to learn the history. And when I was putting together Satchel Paige's all-star team, I learned a lot about the Negro Leagues. And, when you paint a subject, you read about them so you can put a little life into the piece. When my friends look at my picture of Joe DiMaggio, they say, I can see what Marilyn Monroe saw.
I like that. Yeah, that makes sense. You have to know to be able to get the inspiration to bring them to life.
Well,
okay.
They're not coming over to my house. That's for damn sure. They're all dead.
Okay. Donna.
Yeah. So I, as does everybody here, I love baseball. I love it. I eat, breathe, sleep baseball. I also adore photography. So it was really a perfect marriage for me to unite the two. And once I got a camera that was good enough to capture the players from where I was sitting, I was like, oh, well, let's try and get a shot of all my favorite guys. Or let's, if you see the photo, that's the Aaron Judge photo, that's his first major league home run. That I was like, well, it's his first at bat. Let's see what happens. And voila, he hit his first home run. So being able to capture things like that from a personal perspective was phenomenal. But then you take it to another level. And once I got brave enough to start sharing my photography, it became a way to bond with people over the love of the game, or maybe to get some people who weren't so interested in the game to have a level of joy for the game. And then from there, it became an educational tool when I did my Hinchliffe Stadium trading card set to show people, hey, here's a Negro Leagues ballpark that's still standing. Oh, you don't know what the Negro Leagues are? Here's some facts on the back of the cards about what the Negro Leagues are, and showing players appreciation. The game doesn't exist without the players. So to be able to take my photography and get it into the hands of the players and have them say, hey, you noticed me, thank you so much. It's not so much about, oh, look at the picture I took. It's, hey, I thought you were worthwhile. I want to give you thanks for all the joy that you give me. So a bunch of different reasons why there's more, but I'll zip it for the moment.
Well, because you raise an interesting idea, Donna. We often think about baseball wouldn't exist without the fans, but you just put a different perspective on it, that we forget that obviously it doesn't exist without the players. And I don't know if others, that's an interesting sort of twist on the usual way we look at it, from the fan perspective as opposed from the ball player's perspective. And yeah.
It was very surprising to me when I started sharing my photos with the players that they were like, you thought enough of me to focus on me on the field. And I'm like, and that was just mind-blowing to me. Like, of course, what do you think we're here for? Oh yeah, well, okay, that's what you're here for, but you made me the subject of your artwork. It just, and I'm sure everybody on this panel can relate to that in some way, shape, or form, that, hey, thanks for, okay, it's your job, but still there's plenty of competition out there. The
Right.
fact that you chose to focus on a particular player or play or whatever is just, it's fun to then to be able to bond with the players over that and have conversations with them about that is just great. I mean, Aaron Judge, that when I mind-blowingly met him in 2016 before anybody cared, not before anybody cared, I was on a field in Kansas City. The Royals fans in 2016 didn't really so much have him on their radar. And for me to say to him, hey, I was there for your first game and I caught a picture of your first home run, the look on his face was just amazing. And I don't care that I'm talking to a baseball player, future superstar. It's just that personal level of, hey, you noticed me. Thank you so much.
Very cool. Jessica, you look like you were going to add something.
Yeah, the photogs around the players are so imperative to them. And that's obviously, it's a social media world and they think it's so important to showcase what you guys have. I'll be standing there with big names. They'll walk right past us to go talk to the social media people, the people who are taking photography, because they see so many things. And, as a journalist, we could easily tweet something that we saw. The photogs, like, if you want to keep a secret, you go to the photogs, because they've seen stuff historically that they don't report, they don't repeat. They see a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that they don't go off of, so you can trust them. But same thing, you saw a certain lens through a certain lens. And like you said, we know who Aaron Rodgers is now. He's never going to forget that. And that's going to be great for both of you. And I feel like we don't talk about social media enough. I mean, we do because it's kind of a cesspool these days, but when it comes to just showing, the photos and everything else, I think it's so important because you don't need anything else. You post a photo and that tells the story in and of itself. And I feel like that part of just how we're covering sports these days is so beautiful. It's so gorgeous where you don't need words sometimes. And it's such an important part of the game this time around. So that's all I wanted to say. I'm glad that you had that moment because photographers don't get enough credit.
I love photographers.
I do too.
Yep.
Yeah.
So a part of my job is I select photos to go with articles.
Okay.
And again, there's a responsibility in that. So one of the things that I make sure that I'm doing is selecting photos that are representative. I want to make sure that I am showing, if I have the choice, I want to make sure that I am showing players of all different backgrounds, all different races, to make sure that the whole is being represented. And it's not just the same player over and over if I can help it. Sometimes there's a feature about a specific player, you're going to have 3 photos of him. That's how it works. But I also make sure that when we are doing coverage of other stories that I am, stories about fans or stories about personnel, staff, that, I'm mixing it up. I'm making sure that we're showing not just the same group of like male bleacher fans, but also, mixing it up, showing kids, showing women, showing, the whole scope of folks who are involved with baseball. So that's part of my job, and it's a responsibility I take very seriously. And I am so grateful to the photographers who capture a wide range of players, of people, of events happening at the stadium, everything. So grateful for good photogs.
And that's a really interesting perspective, Tracy, to think about, because you do that not only with the photographs, but also, as you pointed out, with stories, and you assign stories, and you have to think about that as well there too, right?
Yes. For the most part, the reporters that I work with come up with their own story ideas, but we certainly, I'm involved in that process. I can make suggestions. We bounce ideas off of each other. But yeah, there's, in choosing what to cover, the resources are limited, right? There's limited time, limited number of reporters, limited access increasingly. So making those choices is really important. And again, I come back to the word responsibility, but that's what it is. Is we are going to bring baseball to the audience, and how can we best do that? Right.
So there's a quick question on a follow-up to that, that Adam is asking. He says, talking about this discussion of choosing visuals is really fascinating. He wonders, do similar rules apply for visuals, charts, and things that aren't photographs?
Yes, for sure. Need to make sure that it is accurate, fair, representative. I've seen some bad charts in my time. So got to make sure that, all of that is up to a quality standard.
Okay.
And that it provides context.
Sure.
The context is there.
So you all do very different things. You all look at the games, and yet the thing that draws you together is this great love of baseball. So in all the various aspects of your careers, do you each have a favorite, and you could say a favorite moment, a highlight, a favorite piece that you have created, something that really stands out for you that you would want to share? And again,
I sold a piece to Brian Gumbel for $5,000.
Which piece did he buy, Margie?
Satchel Page's All-Stars.
Oh, and was he specifically looking for that, or it was just?
It was online. He bought it online through my gallery.
That's awesome. Did you have a chance to talk to him about it, or
no,
it was just okay?
I wasn't allowed to even communicate.
Okay. But now your piece hangs in Brian Gumbel's home.
Or office, which I would prefer because more people would see it.
Sure.
So
Very
we're
cool.
always trying to get him to buy more.
Very cool.
So that's my big highlight.
Absolutely. It's a great highlight.
I did meet Michael Shannon, but that has nothing to do with art. He's a very good actor. Very cute.
For sure. Other highlights?
Yeah, I'm kind of nervous to follow that up, but I'm like, well, here's mine, I guess. But no, I think one of the cool first like big MLB moments was the 2019 wild card game. The A's really struggled that game, but it was, full attendance, a wild card attendance record, 55,000 plus. To see the Coliseum full like that was just gorgeous. And even to cover Sean Manaea, who struggled, was like a cool journalistic moment for me. I was with NBC, so I got to be a little bit more reportery as opposed to now where broadcasting is a different ball game, pun slightly intended. So that was really interesting. But I think one of the top highlights for me was actually just last season, back when I was 12 and I was playing Little League. I had to switch from first to third base. And that week I went to my first A's game. And I remember the moment I sat down, the third baseman hit a home run, and I found a program on the floor, and I was like, "Who is that guy? Like, he just hit the shit out out of the ball." And I saw that him and I shared a birthday, quite a few years apart, and it was Eric Chavez. And when I drove home that day, I remember telling my dad, I think I want to be do they do baseball? Can women be baseball reporters? And this was in its infancy when I think I saw Bonnie Bernstein once, and that was it. So it was like unheard of. And my dad said, not really, but like, let's do it. And so Eric Chavez was the reason why. And I got to actually tell Eric Chavez the story last year when the A's inducted him into the A's Hall of Fame. And in that exact same program, I looked and I saw somebody was living in Reno, the center fielder, and I was living in Reno at the time, and it happened to be Mark Kotze, who's my manager now. So it was this really beautiful full circle moment. And then I got to meet Kim Ng last year, and I had her on my show, and I try to be as professional as possible, but when you're around Kim Ng, like, you're sweating and you're intimidated and it's a hot mess. And the moment we pressed record, journalist Jess was there, and then I stopped pressing record, and then fangirl Jess was out. So it was very much one of those scenarios, and she was happy to come on the show. And after years of covering her and saying she almost got this job, almost so close, almost Padres, almost whoever, and then finally I got to stand with her on the field at the Coliseum and have a great conversation with her. And she offered up so much about what it was like to be a woman in the industry. And I think she knew I was going to ask her, so she just took care of it. But it was my biggest fangirl moment. And I'm obsessed with Joey Votto, and I met him, and that was nothing compared to meeting Kim Ng. So it was really cool. So those are definitely the top moments. See, I'm sweating now talking about her. She's just like the coolest person ever. So that was amazing.
And she was probably standing there just cool as a cucumber the whole time, huh?
So cool. And I was like, why aren't you like freaking out with me here? And she even told me, she was like, just relax. I'm like, I cannot, Kim. Sorry, I just can't.
That's awesome.
She's so little and she means so much.
Yep, she has made us all
That's
Marlins
gorgeous.
fans.
That's beautiful to describe Kim Ng. I love that.
Oh, okay. You can steal it.
All right, I'll go with a highlight. So I'm fortunate that I hang around with a bunch of SABR people, so I've gotten to do some really cool stuff, much more than I would have ever thought as a kid growing up in the middle of nowhere. So all that in my personal life is super awesome. So glad to have gotten to do it. Professionally, as an editor, there is no greater joy than working with phenomenal writers, and I've been really fortunate. I've got a great group now at the Tribune, had a great group that I worked with at The Athletic. A highlight was I edited a feature written by Jason Stark, and it was about Richard Dotson, and it was the story of how Dotson learned in 2018 as an adult that his biological father had played 14 seasons of Major League Baseball. He did not know this during his career. And so it was the family secret. And Jason Stark spent extensive time reporting and interviewing Richard Dotson about his family story. And so I got to edit that piece. And then the piece went on to be included in the 2020 or 21 Best American Sports Writing collection that's curated by Glenn Stout. And, you know, just as an editor, as a sports journalist, like that is the pinnacle of our profession, is inclusion into that book. So very proud of that. And of course, Jason Stark wrote a phenomenal piece in the way that he does. And just, you know, being able to work with writers who have that kind of institutional knowledge of baseball as a whole was just really, really awesome. So.
That's really cool. Go ahead, Donna.
I guess that leaves me. So I'll give a brief personal story and then a photographer story. So my first favorite baseball player was Bobby Mercer. And the Yankees, when they used to do bat day in the early 70s, it wasn't everybody got the same bat. It was you get who you get and you don't get upset. So here I am with my dad going to Yankee Stadium, and he's like, and remember, you don't know who you're going to get. I'm like, oh, Dad, it's okay. I love them all, but Bobby's my guy, but I love them all. I wasn't going to be sad. I was getting a bat. It was great. And there I go. I walk through the turnstile and they hand me the bat, and I look down and it's Bobby Mercer's bat. And I'm like, so saved the bat for years and years and years. And back in the 80s, every weekend there was a different card show with different players signing where I grew up in Brooklyn. And I brought the bat with me and got Bobby Mercer to sign the bat. So that was fantastic. From a photography standpoint, as a pro, last year was the inaugural season for the Staten Island Ferry Hawks, where Kelsey Whitmore plays. And I started doing my usual showing up, handing the players photos of themselves, which led to the team commissioning me to do a 30-foot wall of my photography capturing their inaugural season. So that in and of itself is cool. But so I'm standing there one day towards the end of the season, and who comes walking along but Kelsey Whitmore's dad, who knew me from being around the ballpark. And he walked up to one of the photos of his daughter making this amazing over-the-shoulder catch and said to me, that game was captured on a day when an award-winning photographer from Getty and AP was there specifically covering Kelsey. And her dad was in the stands with his very nice camera as well as some other local photographers. And he turned to me and he said, you know, you got the shot that everybody else wanted, but nobody got, right? And I was, what? And he said, can we have a copy for our family collection? And that just brought it full circle for me. I don't care. I mean, to be able to have them have that moment of joy for them in their personal collection and know that I'm the one who made it possible for them to be able to relive that was just phenomenal.
That's really cool. All of those are. So Donna, I have to ask, does that mean that you're a Yankees fan?
Yes.
Okay. I was afraid you were going to say that as a Mets fan. I was like, I think that means she's a
That's
Yankees
okay.
fan.
I will tell you this, the Mets have the nicer ballpark now. No question, hands down, the Mets have the nicer ballpark of the two.
Between
No
the Mets and
question.
the Yankees, you're talking. Somebody
Between
said,
Citi Field,
yeah.
Citi Field and current Yankee Stadium, Citi Field blows Yankee Stadium away.
Tara, who I know big Yankees, agrees with you, as she said, sadly. So Donna, a question related to, and we can see it in your background very nicely because you've got the great picture of Kelsey there, but you also have your mixed media, which is a really unusual approach. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how that developed and how you choose your subject matter. I love the piece that you did of Andre Dawson with the Hawk. I mean, it obviously makes sense, but can you tell us a little bit about how that has come about?
Sure. So one of the sets of trading cards that I absolutely adore is Allen and Ginter, which started in its modern day incarnation back in 2006. And anybody who knows about the Allen and Ginter trading cards, they take photos and kind of apply a little bit of watercolor. I mean, they transform them from more than a photo to something that looks like it was hand painted. And I've always thought, not always, but once they came out, I said, those kind of really nicely complement real photos. And you put the two of them together and it just seems to work. And I kind of had this idea in my head. I'm like, well, what if I took my photography and the cards and put them together somehow? But never did it. I just, that would be interesting. And along came this thing called COVID-19 and the pandemic, and I had this time on my hands, and I said, all right, I'm going to try and start carving up some cards with this plethora of different knives and glasses and I mean, just to get in there, it's I don't want to say it's a lot harder than it looks and make it seem like I'm all that, but it's not as simple as just take scissors and go around. So I'm like, okay, I perfected that. And I'm like, all right, let me start trying this. And I did. And I was like, this is nicer than what I thought it was going to be. Okay, maybe I'm going to start trying to sell these. So I did them. Every one is a one-of-a-kind piece. It all uses my photography. So I'm not stealing anybody else's work, and nobody else can create what I'm creating because it's my photography. And then I hand cut the card. I color around the card with soft pastels to kind of match the card because the Ginter cards are thicker. And so it creates a complete piece there. And then I come up with some kind of digital background that complements the card and also complements the photo. I print them out anywhere, depending on the ratio between the card and the photo, anywhere from 4x6 to 8x10. I've gone a bit bigger on a few panoramic pieces. And then I have the print with the digital overlay professionally printed and dry mounted. And then the card gets adhered to that. I create an embossed certificate of authenticity. How I go about picking the pieces, obviously it depends on what I've been able to capture with my lens. Sometimes things just kind of come to me. Obviously I get commissions, which is great. Being able to do something like the Aaron Judge piece that I referenced, that's his first home run, is very cool. I also take photos of stadiums, or I do what I call my nickname series. So far for that, I've done a polar bear for Pete Alonso, a rhino for Ryan Sandberg, for those Chicago folks that are here. And I did the hawk for Andre Dawson, which that was the first one that I wanted to do, but getting the hawk photo was a little bit more difficult. And believe it or not, that hawk photo was taken in my backyard Christmas morning, 2022. Who knew?
That's pretty cool. Mary Shea says she has a piece of your art and she really likes it.
Yes.
So very cool. Margie, I'm going to turn it over to you for a moment as a follow-up to that, because so Donna goes out and captures the moment as it's happening. And of course, you're doing paintings, so you get to sit back and think about and pick and choose. How do you choose, besides the fact that you like baseball, right? How do you choose? So for example, what are you working on now? What are you going to be working on next? How do you choose?
Well, a lot of times I've been doing the Negro League players for the last 3 years because the Negro League just had 100th anniversary about 3 years ago.
Okay.
And that Satchel Paige All-Star team took me 2 years of research and whatnot, putting things together with Photoshop. And when you don't know what you're doing, Photoshop's a bitch. But
Gotcha.
I'm joining Black musicians now, Honey Boy Edwards with Clifton Chenier, who's the Zydeco giant, and who's the other fellow? Lightning Hopkins. I can't give away the piece because it's wild. So,
Okay.
you know, but if you want to show, can you show people my pieces?
We can make it, I can show it, or if you have something that you want to show.
No, I
Margie?
don't know how to do that, but I gave you a bunch of images.
Right. And I was going to say to everybody, they're also in the program that got sent to everybody. A lot of Margie's art is in there. You'll be able
Oh,
to see a
good.
piece of Joe DiMaggio and some of the others. And I can try to pull it up here in a moment.
It's
And I can
hard to
show
talk
everybody.
about art and people can't see it.
Right, I got you. I'll pull a couple up here in a moment, and let you talk about that.
Sure.
Tara Krieger asks a question. She says, talking about social media, thinking Players Tribune also, do you worry about having to make space for yourself because players can now control their own images? And I don't know who might want it, Tracy. Yeah.
You think the Players Tribune does not have editors? Extensive editing goes into those pieces. So
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So Jessica, question for you. I'm very curious. Last year in 2022, you kind of had a pretty unique experience with the Reno Aces and getting to actually broadcast one of their games. How did that come about? What was that like? At the time, you were only one of 4 women who were doing that kind of thing. So tell us a little bit about that experience.
It was very humbling. I had a big ego heading into it, and I was humbled very quickly. I can talk, but it's a different art when it comes to broadcasting. So Reno is my hometown. And I was lucky enough to have a really good friend who was their play-by-play, Zach Bayrudy, who's now with the Sacramento River Cats, AAA for the Giants. And I just asked him, like, hey, can I just sit in with you? I've joined him in the booth a few times, and usually it was just because I was in Reno and it was like a hometown return. And they just happened to be playing the Vegas Aviators, the A's AAA. So I joined that. And it was, like I said, it was a lot more work than I anticipated. From a AAA perspective compared to Major League perspective, Major League, they have every stat you can imagine brought to you. You have that in front of you. And luckily I have good relationships with the players so I can pick their brains about things. So my AAA debut was introducing myself to the players and quickly, coming into them with a lot of information about their backgrounds and what they're working on. And AAA is so unique because a lot of the times the guys just got demoted. A lot of times they are journeymen. They haven't been to the bigs and they're frustrated from that. And in AAA for the PCL, you're not going to be dealing with a lot of pitchers because why bring your pitcher to the PCL when they're going to tattoo you every time? So you don't get to meet a lot of the guys either. So the first couple of games were hell, to be honest. I had no idea what I was getting into. And I was introduced to the new rules before anybody else had. So it was way faster. We had the robo umps, which was a whole thing. So I missed the drama of, Angel Hernandez fucking up an entire game. I missed that. So we didn't get that, but everything else, but yeah, as I figured things out, it was amazing because it was the last game that my mom got to come with me to and watch me work, which was phenomenal. And I think that's the biggest memory and takeaway. And the fact that he gave me the opportunity was awesome. And he gave me a second series. And the thing that was really important to me, he gave me feedback, and we don't have a lot of that in baseball because the season's so fast. And I needed the feedback. He needed to tell me what I did and didn't do wrong. But I learned a lot from it and it helped me this season. But I also knew that it was something I needed to get to do. And I'm glad that I did it. And I want to do it again. I never thought I'd be in a booth and doing color or play-by-play, but now I have a hunger for that to add to everything that I'm doing. And I felt like that was something that I wanted to do. And I still feel like I need a trillion more games to feel like I'm even on halfway there. And so when I offer up criticism, I remember that, or not even criticism, because I don't even think I deserve to offer criticism where I'm at in my career. But when it comes to getting criticism, I make sure it's the Zach Bayrutis of the world who were saying, Jessica, you kind of suck. Maybe don't do that anymore. And so that was something. But overall, it was one of the coolest experiences of my life because I was in my hometown. I learned a lot. There was a certain grind that I forgot about because I hadn't been covering the minors in a while. Everybody pulls the tarp in the minors. You can't, it doesn't matter if you're a broadcaster, you're with everybody else. You are on the field and you're covered in sweat and you're gross. But it was awesome. And I got to be on the local news station, and I hadn't been on the Reno news station ever, which is funny because that's my hometown. And they did a piece about me, which was really cool. And yeah, my family got to be there, which was the best part. But if you ever want to be humbled, join a minor league broadcast because you'll be very humbled.
That an incredible experience. Yeah, I can't even imagine what that must have been like, and particularly in your hometown.
Yeah. And that was what was more nerve-wracking than anything. I had people that I haven't seen in a while. My nephew's sitting there, and I have a 13-year-old niece who judges everything. And it didn't matter how my calls were. My eyeliner wasn't right. And that's what she went off of. I'm like, but I said a terrible call. She's like, but your eyeliner looks bad. I'm like, cool. So like I said, very humbling. Yes.
Yeah. And in a way that Tracy, right, print journalism doesn't quite have that same, because it's not in the moment. It's not, you have time to process and think about, and yet the criticism comes, right?
Yes and no. Sometimes you have lead time to work on a piece, and other times you are on deadline. So coming back to newspapers after time at an online only outlet and also at a radio station, coming back to newspapers, it's like, oh, hey, deadline. Like the paper has to get on the press. So it's a combination of sometimes we've got time, other times we don't. And with my job, the way that, I'm not at the ballpark. I am in my chair, in my house, at my computer all the time. And so I will not pretend that I go through the grind that our beat writers do. And it is a grind. And, it's 162 games, but also you're working on your off days, and also your, off seasons. I swear last year there was no off season. It just kept going. So it's a different kind of grind, but it's still there. And, going back to Tara's question about social media and the way that, my off the cuff answer was, of course, there are editors, but regardless of the platform, there's always going to be a need for editors, for producers, for photographers, for people behind the scenes. All of these athletes with their social media accounts, they have staff that, if not does it for them, helps them extensively with it. It's great to have the voice of the athletes, but they are not doing it alone. And it's really kind of funny. What I noticed is with some younger Major League Baseball players, there's a formula to their social media that it's very formulaic, right? It's the same types of photos, it's the same types of posts, and like every third one you see the dog, or you see the wife or the girlfriend or the babies. And it's like, if you look at it kind of across multiple players, you really can see a pattern. And I don't know if that comes from the team. I don't know if it comes from like a specific agency representation that the players are with. Like, I don't know who's behind this, but it's certainly not that 24-year-old man with his phone in his pocket. He's got a Finsta that his friends and family are on, but like that public image is very curated. And so even though the platform is changing, the messaging is changing, there's still a need for folks who are working behind the scenes.
Thanks. Margie, I'm going to show the piece you were talking about of the Satchel page. So hopefully everybody can see this.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, so you could talk a little bit about this piece if you wanted to, now that everybody can see it.
Oh, well, at first I was going to be commissioned to do this, but he wouldn't pay me. This is what artists go through. We're always negotiating. Somebody wants something for $2 an hour, or for free, you need the exposure. Well, I got screwed. And so my gallery took over and told me to finish it, which I did. These are all the different players from the different teams. Now, what I had to do with most of them is take the heads of the Negro League players, because photography back then was so crude that if you tried to take a picture of an African-American person, it turned out to be all dark. So I had to futz with old photographs on Photoshop. And then I had to put heads on bodies of white players. Because again, photography back then, they didn't cover Negro leagues as well as they covered the white leagues. So then I had to put heads on bodies, and let me tell you, trying to get a head proportion to the body, there were initially a lot of guys had heads too big or too little.
Sure.
But then I pulled it together in Photoshop, got an airplane in there, and laid it out, and I started painting it with the aid of researchers, supposedly. Well, they gave me the wrong information. I'd finished it with the wrong Monarchs uniforms. I'd start over.
Oh, wow.
Well,
Okay.
you know, I was tenacious. I was going to finish that.
You said, I'm going to finish this regardless. Right.
Yeah.
So that's just, yeah.
And so what I did was I finished it, and Victor, who owns the gallery, put it online, and Brian Gumbel contacted him and said, I would love to buy it. And he said, hell yes. And then I took the money and visited friends.
That's awesome. Very cool. So that's just an example, and there are other pieces of Margie's pieces in the program. But a question came up, probably for you, Tracy, that was asked about whether or not real-time pieces get the same kind. Do they get edited the same way the other kinds of pieces do?
Yes, but it's more of a quick process, because obviously, you know, things that are written during the game or things that are written like immediately after the game have to turn around really quickly. And so I don't have time to sit there and fact check like every third word. So the primary goals are making sure that it is accurate and making sure that we are not going to get sued for libel. Yeah, those are the immediate goals of real-time turnaround content.
Awesome. And Donna, I saw your response back to Tara's question, if you want, because we saw you disappear, but we're glad you're back.
Yeah, my internet service provider tends to be a little herky-jerky when it's very wet out, unfortunately, and it was very wet in this area yesterday into this morning. So I'm back though.
So as others of you, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat, because we've got wonderful opportunity here to talk to some incredible women who are doing some amazing things with this sport that we all love. And so we know that Margie is a Cubs fan. We know now that Donna is a Yankees fan. Tracy and Jessica, even though you are journalists and have to keep a measure of objectivity at times, where do your loyalties lie, and how does that play into your love of the game and what you do?
Yeah, so I am an A's fan.
Okay.
So I grew up an A's fan because it was that first game I went to. And I think I can relate to them in the scrappiness of them, where people kind of don't take me seriously. And then, I mean, this season and last season maybe aren't a great example, but when it comes to certain games where it's like, don't sleep on the A's, I kind of have that mentality too. And yes, David is correct. I'm also a Joey Votto fan. So whatever team Joey Votto is on, that is the team I'm rooting for. So hopefully he returns next season, because I can only handle so much heartbreak this season. So yeah.
Baseball does give us a lot of that.
Yeah.
I grew up a Cubs fan, but I'm kind of at the point now where I'm rooting for people more than I'm rooting for laundry. I also, and I'm at an age where like I'm rooting for the old guys, right? Like I want anybody in this game over age like 36 to succeed. So that's I'm a little bit there. But I still like the Cubs. Again, got to keep a little distance now that I'm working in Chicago, but still enjoy going to Wrigley, going to games. I spent 3 seasons, 3.5, as a dedicated Baltimore Orioles editor. So even though I had no connection to the Orioles, just being so in depth with that team, it's been fun to see their rise. It's been fun to see that pay off. And getting to know more about the players on the team and such. Yeah, but it's just kind of I root for the good guys now, wherever they may be. And I adore Votto as well. Like, he's fantastic. Votto was also great with the media. So like, anybody who a reporter comes back and says, oh yeah, this person was awesome to work with, they gave me time, they gave me great quotes. Like I am in favor of anyone who's a good quote. So those are kind of the people and situations I look for now.
So Jessica just wrote, knowing Tracy will root for me in my late 30s helps me.
Heck yeah. Heck yeah.
But so that raises an interesting question, particularly for you, Tracy, and Jessica and Donna, who obviously are out on and have had opportunities to interact directly with the players and things. How that works. And you just mentioned, any player that will talk to you, give you quotes. Have you had experiences where that doesn't happen? And how do you approach that when they don't want to talk to you? They don't want to interact with you.
A lot of times it's a timing thing. They have a schedule just as imperative, if anything, because they got to stretch and stuff. Seth Brown, it's like this funny inside joke that every time I need him for a quote, he's just never around, or it's like right in between stuff. I've been covering that man for 5 years and I have yet to have a sit down with him. And it's just one of those things where we always happen to miss each other. And I have to, kind of call an audible because I'm scheduled to do a pregame hit and he's not around. So I just grab somebody else. And that's the beauty of it is like, there's like Aledmus Diaz, Tony Kemp, a lot of guys are just going to be available for a quote no matter what. And not to mention, you see some of the guys get better with the media over time. Covering the Oakland A's, it's a lot of young guys, and you have to just kind of fill them out because I just met them a week ago, kind of a deal, and just kind of how that works. But a lot of times it's just, like I said, it's a timing thing. It is what it is. If I have to go solo on a hit, that's fine too. But I also know that there's been times if they don't want to talk to me, that's fine too. I've been very lucky. And I will say the one question I get asked the most is who is the biggest jerk to work with? And I've been lucky. I think the biggest jerk sometimes just myself. Like, it's just one of those things where like, sometimes I'm just like not in the mood to talk to people, but I have to. And so I think that's where it comes down to, and they know that I have to do my job. There was a time where we were talking to Paul Blackburn, and because he was the pitcher that day, and he's locker buddies with Tony Kemp, and all the media was in front of Tony's locker, and Tony just finished a shower and he had to sit like on the table just wearing a towel because he's like, and he was cool about it. He's like, I know you guys have a job to do. And he understands that. They don't all sometimes are that open. It's a timing thing, and it happens. The first couple of times I felt kind of personally offended because I was being rejected. And that's the thing. Like, I've had my articles edited. It's constant rejection. It's constant, you did this wrong, fix it, no big deal. So after you deal with a lot of that, you're just used to it. So you just kind of suck it up, figure something out, call an audible, or sometimes you just have to go on the fly and figure out something on your own.
Okay.
Yeah. For me, it's because I'm not writing stories and don't necessarily need quotes. It works a little differently, but in doing the commission wall for the Ferry Hawks, there were a couple of guys, you know, when you want to get everybody on the team, and my goal was to do, because it was such a large space, to not just do in-game photos, but also get some candids. There were a couple of guys that just, the relief pitchers, it was tough to get any photos at all, because you never knew. I wasn't there every single game. You didn't know when you were going to get them. But there were some guys that, and they didn't know that I was doing this. This was done as a surprise to the players. So there were a couple of guys that just did not want candid photos taken, and they just would shy away from the camera. And that's the personal choice. I didn't want to blow the surprise and say to them, hey, if you don't, you know, if you keep hiding from the camera, you're not going to be on the wall. But we ended up making it work in the end. It was just weird. I mean, I guess, you know, some people are shy, and once they found out, once the wall went up, they were like, oh, like, sorry, you know.
They lost their chance.
Exactly.
Oh, there's an interesting question from Marlene. She asks, what's it like working with translators? Have you had to do that, Jessica? Because
Yeah, the easiest way that I was taught, and I'm using it, is to make the questions as short as possible, which is difficult for me. I ramble on. So imagine having to translate something I just said for like 30 seconds, and then you're expecting somebody to say word for word to the player. So you just make it short and concise. That way they know just like how to ask it as short and concise as possible. And then just remind yourself that, you know, you have to write in the article or say via the team interpreter, Ramon Hernandez, because sometimes those things can be kind of difficult. I also follow up, because a lot of times we have interpreters that have very thick accents, and I want to make sure I don't screw them over and just say, you know, and then I have great interpreters too that'll double check with the person that they're talking to as well. So that was my thing too, and it's a fun challenge for me as well. And I'm trying to learn Spanish, and it just hasn't stuck. I think 1 year of middle school Spanish, I think I could just handle stuff. I can't. So it's one of those scenarios, but I definitely short, sweet, to the point, and then you're good.
I'll echo that. We always have to note in an article if a player said a quote through an interpreter. That's for, you know, obviously accuracy, clarity, and just so that the reader understands the context that that quote was spoken in, or kind of where these words are coming from. You know, sometimes things can get lost in translation a little bit, but, you know, again, translators, valuable personnel, so we appreciate them, but also have to note where that is happening.
yeah. So this is sort of a big question, but if you all in your different areas of where you work had a chance to think about what would be your dream piece, your dream interview, the sort of big, that if you got to do this, something that you haven't done yet, or interviewed somebody or painted the particular, what would it be?
I'd like to meet Willie Mays.
Okay.
But
well, because you've got that great painting of Willie Mays's catch.
yes, I do. But he was the greatest in
Okay.
my eyes. Not that I saw him. I would have been an embryo while he played. He retired in the 60s, right? Late 60s?
A little bit later than that, but yeah,
Okay, I probably did see him on TV.
early 70s. But okay, so Willie Mays would be yours. Anybody else?
Can we pretend we have a time machine?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Then I'm gonna say, because it just ties in a couple of different things for me. Photographing Larry Doby on the field at Hinchliffe Stadium.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I have a nice painting of
Yeah.
Larry.
Yeah.
Especially at Hinchcliffe. That would be really cool.
Yeah, right. So for those who don't know, Larry Doby was born in South Carolina, but moved to Paterson, New Jersey, and played high school ball for Paterson Eastside High School. He also played football and I believe track for them, and lettered in all three. And he was discovered by FM Manley and the Newark Eagles while he was playing at Hinchliffe Stadium. And that's where he ended up having his tryout for the Newark Eagles. And then from there went on to break the American League color barrier 11 weeks after Jackie Robinson broke the National League color barrier. So to photograph him where it started would be kind of cool. I've gotten to photograph his son there in the renovated ballpark, but I would love to be able to photograph him there.
Cool. Tracy or Jessica, any big?
I've always wanted to have a sit down with Tim Lincecum, like an in-depth sit down with him, because he's so elusive and people are always curious about him. And I covered him a little bit when he was making his comeback. And I just knew like him and I would have like a really good conversation. So something like that, where we're just like walking around in Washington, doing all of his spots, like what he's been up to, talking about all those rings and like when he got busted for pot and if he embraced like what's going on now. Like that's like a conversation I would love to have with him.
Awesome.
I mean, I don't have any like, you know, pie in the sky type thought that I've ever held on to, but kind of one that I've been noodling on for about a year that I can't really like get anybody to bite on. So a lot of coverage of sticky stuff, right? And the different types of substances used, and just all the different, you know, there's been a lot of coverage of sticky stuff. What I want to know is, what are these players using to remove the sticky stuff? And I'm serious. I want to talk to a cosmetic chemist, and I want to see like these different compounds. What substance could you use to remove them? Because we know from Max Scherzer that rubbing alcohol does not work. You know, what kind of compounds, and what are we looking for in lockers? Like, are we looking for the player that's got like a bottle of Dawn dish soap? Are we looking with, you know, for someone who snagged their girlfriend's micellar water? Like, what are we looking for? Because what are these players using to get this off? So that's kind of like that would be the story that I would want to pursue with like scientific sources. So
that's awesome.
And of course, no one will ever talk about this, right? Like,
right.
You never get that answer.
I never actually thought about it till you said that. That's fascinating.
There's a song about the stuff.
Yeah,
okay.
There is. Yep.
Is that the baseball
Donna
project?
says, I want those answers too.
Nice.
So Mary Shea asked a question, and it's probably going to be maybe our last question, and it's a good one to end on. She wanted to know if there's anybody in you that you'd said that this was the person or persons that were a big inspiration to you and what you do.
I'll go first.
Okay.
So twofold answer, not surprisingly, because so my dad, because he is the one directly responsible for instilling the love of the game in me, even though it was my paternal grandfather and my great grandfather. My dad's the one who was there through the whole thing, brought me into my first game, taught me how to score, introduced me to cards, so on and so forth. So I do this as a tribute to him. Artistically, Dick Perez, huge inspiration, although quite strangely, I didn't make the connection until just this past summer. It was like subconscious inspiration. Like, I love his work. I love his style. And it wasn't until I was at the National this past summer, getting ready with Jason Schwartz to meet Dick Perez. Jason was like, you know, your work like so closely mirrors his in the large photo of the player and then the small insert. And I was like, okay, don't I feel stupid right now that that I didn't make that connection? But so that's my answer.
Great.
I'll chime in. So I don't know that there was any one person who's inspired me to do what I do, but there are people who inspire me to keep going. I will put a plug in for my other organization, Awesome, the Association for Women in Sports Media. I joined Awesome when I was in college, and it was one of the best things I could have done for my career because it put me in touch with a network of women who were working in sports. And I didn't see anyone growing up who was doing that. And just over the years, it's kind of the strength of that collective. This is a hard business to work in as a woman. And the strength of that collective gives me motivation to keep going, even when it gets really, really hard.
That's great.
Margie, I come across so much adversity as a woman baseball artist. A lot of times I've had to block people on Facebook because they call me words that I'd rather not repeat. It is a male-dominated business of all sports, art, journalism, you name it, trying to play as a player. We have to be twice as good as the guys. You know that? We do. And we have to try twice as hard. Now, there's a guy who paints baseball pictures who gets all the publicity. I won't name him because y'all know who he is. He's also a friend of mine, and he's a great artist, but I'm a pretty damn good artist too. No one knows who I am.
Well, we're gonna try this group.
Let me tweet you. Let me do whatever you need. I got you.
There you go, right there.
I know, sister. We got everybody's back.
This is the support we're looking for. So who's your inspiration, Jessica?
Definitely my dad. I can't tell you the moment when I told him I was curious about being an A's reporter and he was just like, let's do it. That was all I needed. And recently Melanie Newman is the reason why I kept going, because I wanted to quit the industry. And then she called me and says, if you quit, I have to quit. Imagine me telling Melanie Newman not to pursue her dreams. That would have been like such the worst thing to do. And then 2 hours later, MLB.com called me for my first call. And to have a man in my life who said, okay, and my dad was old school. And the fact that he was like, okay, let's do it. And I feel like that is what is the reason that kept me going. So when he passed, I made sure I'm continuing because of him. And my mom recently passed too. She was unbelievably proud of me. And if it wasn't for them, because you have to continue on for them, that's a big reason why. So that those two, and then Melanie for sure, the reason why I keep going.
That's awesome. Very, very cool. I just want to say thank you to all four of you for great conversation and the inspiration that you are, and the wonderful words, artwork, everything that you provide that helps us to continue to enjoy this wonderful game. And so thank you so much for joining us today. Really, really appreciate everything that you guys do and will continue to do, and we'll all look for. And particularly for Donna and Margie, in the program that you got, there's information about how you can find their work, but if you also want to put it in the chat, feel free to do that. But thank you all, really, and you can read the comments that are there that are just superb. So thank you, all four of you. And Jessica, you've probably got to get back to work.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, and to everybody else, we're going to take a break now for lunch so everybody can stretch, everybody can go re-energize themselves, and we will be back ready to start again at 1:30 Eastern Time, 12:30 Central Time, 10:30 Pacific. I think I got everybody this time. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you back in a little bit. Thank you to our speakers this morning and to Tara as our host.
Thank you.
See you back at 1:30.